The premiere of Bird at the Cannes Film Festival was supposed to be a celebration. Red carpet, photographers, industry luminaries, and 500 journalists waiting for the post-screening press conference. Everything was going according to plan, until a reporter asked a question that changed the entire evening. Clint Eastwood listened to the complete question, set down his microphone, stood up from the panel table, and walked out of the room without saying a single word. 500 reporters sat in stunned silence, watching one of Hollywood's biggest stars abandon his own premiere. What the reporter had asked, and why Clint's wordless departure became the most powerful statement of the night, would be discussed in film circles for decades. The Palais des Festivals was electric with anticipation. Cannes had always attracted controversy and drama, but this year's lineup promised something special. Clint Eastwood had brought Bird, his passion project about jazz legend Charlie Parker, a film that had already generated buzz for its artistic ambition and unconventional approach. The screening had gone well. The audience had responded positively, applauding as the credits rolled. Critics were scribbling notes, already forming their assessments. The film was dark, challenging, and exactly the kind of serious artistic statement that Cannes audiences appreciated. Now came the press conference. 500 journalists from around the world packed into the conference hall, cameras and recorders ready. The stage held a long table with microphones for Clint and key members of the production team. Producers, the cinematographer, Forrest Whitaker, who had delivered a stunning performance as Parker. Clint took his seat at the center of the table. He wore a simple dark suit, no flashy accessories. His expression was neutral, professional, the face of a man who had done hundreds of press conferences and knew exactly how they worked. The moderator welcomed everyone and opened the floor for questions. The first 30 minutes proceeded normally. Journalists asked about the creative process, the challenges of depicting Charlie Parker's life, the decision to shoot in certain locations. Clint answered thoughtfully, giving the kind of substantive responses that serious film journalists appreciated. "Why Charlie Parker?" one reporter asked. "Because his story deserves to be told," Clint replied. "He was a genius who changed music forever, and most people don't know his name. That's a tragedy worth addressing." Was it difficult working with jazz musicians who knew Parker personally? They were invaluable. They kept us honest. They made sure we weren't just making another Hollywood biography that simplified everything for easy consumption. Forrest Whitaker fielded questions about his preparation, describing the months he spent studying Parker's recordings and surviving footage. The producers discussed the financing challenges, how difficult it was to secure funding for a serious drama about a black jazz musician who struggled with addiction. Everything was proceeding as expected. Then, a journalist in the third row raised his hand. His name was Marcus Bennett. He worked for a British tabloid that specialized in celebrity scandal and controversy. He had no interest in discussing cinematography or musical authenticity. He had come to Cannes looking for conflict, and he thought he had found an angle. "Mr. Eastwood," Bennett said, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowded room, "I'd like to ask about some concerns that have been raised regarding this production." "Go ahead." "There are those who say that a white director making a film about a black jazz legend is inherently problematic, that you've appropriated Charlie Parker's story for your own artistic ambitions. How do you respond to the accusation that this film is an act of cultural theft?" The room shifted. This was not the kind of question typically asked at Cannes press conferences. This was provocation, designed to generate headlines rather than illuminate the filmmaking process. Several journalists turned to watch Clint's reaction. His face remained neutral. "Is that your complete question?" Clint asked. "There's more," Bennett said, clearly enjoying the attention. "Some critics have suggested that you cast a black actor in the lead simply to provide cover for your own exploitation of black culture. That Forrest Whitaker is essentially serving as a shield against legitimate criticism of a white man profiting from black pain." The conference room was completely quiet. Everyone waited for Clint's response. He had options. He could address the question directly, defending his artistic choices and his right to tell any story that moved him. He could deflect, turning the question back on the reporter, or redirecting to other panelists. He could express anger, challenging the premise of the question and the motives of the person asking it. Instead, Clint did something nobody expected. He set down his microphone. Not dramatically, not throwing it or slamming it, just placing it gently on the table in front of him. Then he stood. The movement was unhurried, deliberate. He pushed back his chair, rose to his full height, and looked out at the 500 journalists filling the room. He didn't speak. He didn't explain. He simply turned and walked toward the exit at the side of the stage. The walk from the table to the door took approximately 15 seconds. In that time, no one in the room moved or spoke. 500 journalists watched in stunned silence as Clint Eastwood, the star and director of the film they had gathered to discuss, abandoned his own premiere press conference. Some reached for their cameras trying to capture the moment. Others sat frozen, uncertain how to process what was happening. The moderator started to rise, then thought better of it. Forrest Whitaker and the producers exchanged confused glances. Clint reached the door, he opened it, stepped through, and closed it behind him. The sound of the door closing echoed through the silent room. Then chaos erupted. The room exploded into noise. Journalists shouted questions to no one in particular. Cameras flashed at the empty chair where Clint had been sitting. The moderator tried to restore order, speaking into a microphone that could barely be heard over the commotion. Marcus Bennett looked momentarily triumphant, then uncertain. He had wanted a reaction. He had gotten one, just not the kind he could easily exploit. "What just happened?" someone asked. He walked out, without saying anything, not a word. Because of that question. What else? Forrest Whitaker leaned toward his microphone. "I think I can speak to this," he said quietly. The room gradually settled, eager to hear from someone, anyone, who might explain what had just occurred. Whitaker's voice was measured, thoughtful. "I've worked with Clint for months on this project," he said. "I've watched him pour his heart into telling Charlie Parker's story with respect and authenticity. The question that was just asked, the accusation embedded in that question, fundamentally misunderstands what this film is about and why Clint made it. Because some accusations don't deserve defense, they deserve silence." "What do you mean?" The premise of that question was that Clint Eastwood exploited black culture for profit. That I'm a shield, not a collaborator. That the entire production was an act of theft rather than tribute. Whitaker paused. Engaging with that premise, arguing against it, would have given it legitimacy it doesn't deserve. So walking out was a statement? Walking out was the statement. Words would have diluted it. The press conference continued without Clint. Forrest Whitaker and the producers answered questions as best they could, but the focus had irrevocably shifted. Every question now circled back to the walkout. Has he ever done this before? Not to my knowledge. Will he come back? I don't know. Is the film in jeopardy? The film is finished. It exists. What happens to it commercially is separate from what happened in this room. Marcus Bennett tried to ask a follow-up question, but other journalists shouted him down. "You got your moment," someone said. "Now let serious people ask serious questions." Bennett sat back, visibly uncomfortable. The remaining panelists did their best to redirect attention to the film itself, to Charlie Parker's legacy, to the artistic choices that had shaped the production, to the performances and music that made Bird worth watching. But everyone knew the story of the night would be Clint Eastwood's silent departure. News of the walkout spread immediately. Within an hour, entertainment journalists around the world were reporting what had happened. The story dominated coverage of Cannes that evening, overshadowing other premieres and announcements. Reactions were divided. Some praised Clint for refusing to dignify a provocative question with a response. "The question was designed to generate controversy, not understanding," one critic wrote. "Eastwood's silence was the most eloquent response possible." A director has a responsibility to discuss his work, even when questions are uncomfortable, another journalist argued. Walking out looked like avoidance, not principle. The tabloid that employed Marcus Bennett ran the story with predictable spin. Eastwood storms out when confronted about exploitation. The mainstream entertainment press took a different approach. Eastwood's silent protest, when no responses, is the strongest response. The following morning, Clint released a brief written statement. It was distributed to press outlets without additional comment or explanation. "I made Bird because Charlie Parker's music changed my life, and his story deserved to be told. I made it with collaborators who shared that conviction, including Forrest Whitaker, who brought Parker to life with extraordinary talent and dedication. Art is not defined by the identity of its creator, but by the truth it conveys. Anyone who believes otherwise has already decided that categories matter more than humanity. I will not debate whether I had the right to make this film. The film exists. It speaks for itself. Those who want to engage with it will. Those who want to reduce it to arguments about identity are welcome to their arguments. I am not interested in participating. My silence was my response. This statement is my final word on the matter. That was all. No interviews, no follow-up appearances, no additional explanation. The statement was 42 words, plus a brief introduction and conclusion. Clint Eastwood had said everything he intended to say. The walkout had an unexpected effect on the film's reception. Critics who might have dismissed Bird as a prestige project from a white director tackling black subject matter found themselves re-evaluating their assumptions. Clint's refusal to defend himself, his absolute silence in the face of accusation, suggested a confidence that transcended the usual Hollywood self-promotion. He wasn't asking anyone to validate his right to make the film. He was simply presenting the work and letting it be judged on its merits. There's something refreshing about Eastwood's approach, one critic wrote. He doesn't plead his case, he doesn't seek permission. He makes the art he believes in and trusts audiences to respond authentically. Bird received the Best Actor award at Cannes for Forrest Whitaker's performance. The recognition was significant, a validation of the film's artistic achievement despite the controversy surrounding its director's departure from the press conference. Marcus Bennett's career took an unexpected turn. The question he had asked, designed to generate controversy and attention, had succeeded beyond his expectations. But the attention wasn't the kind he wanted. Other journalists criticized him for grandstanding, for using a serious artistic event to pursue tabloid conflict. He wasn't seeking truth, one colleague wrote. He was seeking headlines. There's a difference. Bennett defended himself in interviews, arguing that his question raised legitimate concerns about cultural appropriation in Hollywood. But the defense rang hollow. His question hadn't been designed to explore those concerns thoughtfully. It had been designed to provoke a reaction that would make him the story rather than the film. He had succeeded in making himself the story, just not in the way he intended. Within 2 years, Bennett had left journalism entirely. He later admitted in an interview that the Cannes incident had forced him to reconsider his approach to his work. I asked that question to get a rise out of Eastwood, he said. Instead, his silence got a rise out of me. It made me think about what I was actually doing with my career. The incident became a case study in handling hostile questions. Public relations professionals discussed it in training sessions. Film schools included it in courses on media relations. Communication experts analyzed why Clint's silent departure had been more effective than any verbal response could have been. The principle was simple but difficult to execute. Some questions don't deserve engagement. Some accusations are designed to trap you regardless of how you respond. Some situations are best addressed by removing yourself entirely. The traditional response to a provocative question is defense. One PR expert explained. You explain, you justify, you argue. But defense implies that the accusation has enough validity to require response. Eastwood's walkout said the opposite, that the question itself was beneath engagement. Isn't that arrogant? Someone asked. It's confident. There's a difference. Arrogance would have been staying and lecturing the reporter about his ignorance. Confidence was trusting that intelligent observers would understand the situation without explanation. Years later, Clint was occasionally asked about the Cannes incident. His responses were always brief. I made the choice that felt right at the moment. Do you regret walking out? I regret that the question was asked. I don't regret my response. What would you say to people who thought you should have defended yourself? I'd say they're welcome to their opinion. I don't share it. Did the controversy affect how the film was received? The film exists independently of the controversy. People who watched it experienced Charlie Parker's story. People who focused on the press conference experienced something else entirely. Both groups made their choices. Bird was recognized as one of the finest jazz biographies ever made, praised for its authenticity, its respect for Parker's music, and Forrest Whitaker's transformative performance. The controversy faded. What remained was the work itself and the memory of a director who trusted that the work would speak for itself. Clint Eastwood halted his premiere. 500 reporters watched him walk out in silence. The moment could have been a disaster, a public relations catastrophe that overshadowed the film and damaged his reputation. Instead, it became a statement about the limits of engagement, a statement about the difference between serious questions and provocative attacks, a statement about the confidence required to let work speak for itself without endless justification. The lesson wasn't that walkouts were always appropriate. The lesson was that silence could be more powerful than speech when the situation demanded it. That refusing to engage with bad faith questions wasn't avoidance. It was principle. That sometimes the most eloquent response was no response at all. Clint Eastwood understood this instinctively. He had spent decades in an industry that demanded constant self-promotion, constant defense of creative choices. In that moment at Cannes, he refused. He trusted that the film would speak for itself. He trusted that intelligent observers would understand. He trusted that silence could say what words could not. And he was right. 500 reporters watched him walk out. And in that walk, they witnessed something more powerful than any defense could have provided. The absolute confidence of a man who knew his work and didn't need anyone's permission to make it.